Hello, my name is Andy Collins and I'm going to be talking to you about game theory. So what is game theory? Well, there are a lot of definitions of game theory out there, to be perfectly frank, but this is one I quite like because I think it sums up the subject. So game theory is this study of mathematical models, so it's some kind of mathematical representation, but critically it's about situations involving more than one decision maker. So more than one rational decision maker, to be blunt. So what does that mean? Well, that means that it's not just an individual deciding the outcome of the situation. Okay, there are other people involved, and we call these situations games. Now, you'll see some examples in a second. You're like, is that really a game? Well, yeah. It's just one way of considering the scenario. Okay, so where is game theory used? Where would I expect to see game theory? So here's just some examples. Board games, business negotiations, auctions, commuter congestion, and international alliances. So what are not games? That's an obvious question. Well, things that are puzzles. Okay, puzzles are, something that just one individual does. Okay, games that are just pure chance are really just, even though they might involve more than one person, they're just still pure chance. So if you imagine if I flip a coin and you get the coin if it's heads and I get the coin if it's tails, that's just pure chance. Now you could argue there's a decision in the first place there, that the choice to actually play that game, but the actual game itself is not actually something that's of interest. And the decision models that are only for one player, like Markov decision processes. Okay, again, game theory is exclusively looking at situations involving more than one decision maker. So what are some of the characteristics, elements of a game? What are the key terminology that you might hear? Well, one of the terms is players, the decision makers, and those players have some kind of action to do. So if they've only got a single action, they're not really making a decision. So there has to be multiple actions available to them. And depending on what they do and depending on what the other decision makers do, they're going to get some kind of reward. We tend to call this in game theory the payoff. And on top of that, there might be some kind of strategy in how they choose their actions. So we find these are the common elements within game theory. So why game theory, right? Why does it even exist? Which is a fair question. Well, situations involving multiple decision makers can be complicated, and it can be difficult to understand. Game theory provides a means to try and gain some kind of understanding of the phenomena that occurs, within these games. So what kind of questions could be asked? Well, one I already hinted at earlier was Bayes' paradox, and what happens in Bayes' paradox is we actually find that congestion increases if we actually add or build more roads to a road network sometimes. And so why does that happen? Okay, but there's other questions that are quite interesting, like the Hotelian's law, which says that shops that are very similar, like pharmacies or gas stations, tend to be built close to each other. And it's like, well, that's really inconvenient for the consumer. I want them spread out, right? But they tend to cluster together. So why is that? And these are legitimate questions asked by game theorists. So how are games actually implemented? How do you actually do game theory? Well, first thing you got to do, it's a two-part process, but the first thing you got to do is represent the game in one of many different forms. Game theory has different forms that you can represent games in. And the reason we need to represent them in these forms is A, they're useful, and we'll see that in later videos, but also they help in the context of trying to find some kind of solution. And that's the second part, is that we need to find some kind of solution concept to solve the game. Now, in game theory, there are more than one solution concept, and there are different solution concepts depending on the different type of game theory that you're dealing with. So that's an important feature. So coming to the end of the lecture, hopefully you've now got an idea of what game theory is, some of the key terms that you might hear related to game theory, and a rough idea of how we go around game theory. Okay, thank you.